Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video where I'll be reviewing 4 recent releases at the cinema that I've just watched. In tonight's episode, I'll be looking at Taxi Driver from 1976. This is the 50th anniversary of the film and it's been re-released at the cinema. Also, I'll be looking at Evil Dead Burn, The Odyssey and Spiderman Brand New Day. But first, I'll be looking at Taxi Driver. So this is a classic film directed by Martin Scorsese that stars Robert De Niro. It was written by Paul Schrader, runs 114 minutes. It cost 1.9 million to make, but it made back 29 million and is now regarded as a classic. So the plot's about a taxi driver named Travers, who's also an ex-Marine veteran. So he works driving around New York City, and one day he decides to help this underage prostitute from a pimp in an effort to clean out the city of its corruption. So Martin Scorsese was only 33 years old when he directed Taxi Driver. Robert De Niro actually worked as a real New York taxi driver for several weeks to prepare himself for the role. And Robert De Niro just recently won a Best Actor Oscar for his part in The Godfather Part 2. The screenwriter, Paul Schrader, wrote the script in just under 2 weeks. He was drawing on feelings of loneliness and isolation he experienced during a difficult period in his life. The score was composed by Bernard Herrmann, and this was actually his final film score. He died just hours after completing the recorded sessions. The violent ending received an X rating. So to satisfy the censors, Scorsese desaturated the colours, making the blood appear less vivid. The film was nominated for 4 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Actor for Robert De Niro's performance, Best Supporting Actress for Jodie Foster, and Best Original Score. However, it didn't win any. It's interesting that many critics debate the final scene, and some believe Travers survives and becomes a celebrated hero, while others interpret the ending as a fantasy occurring as he dies. Martin Scorsese has deliberately left the ending open to interpretation. So Taxi Driver is frequently ranked among the greatest films ever made and is often cited as one of Martin Scorsese's defining masterpieces. So Taxi Driver is actually one of my favourite films. I thought De Niro was outstanding. It's possibly his best performance actually, although he's done a load of great others. But the film's got a great cast. It's got Jodie Foster, who very controversially was only 12 when she made this film. And she's supposed to be playing a prostitute. Sybil Shepherd's saying, you even have Harvey Keitel playing the pimp. It's interesting that one of my favourite films, The Joker, from 2019, was inspired by this film, the look of it. So the streets of New York look almost the same as in this film. And oddly enough, De Niro's in both films. And I actually like the ambiguous ending, where a lot of critics think that he actually died and he was just imagining the ending. And it does seem a little odd, the ending, after he's been shot, that he can get away with it and drive a taxi. So that doesn't seem like possible. So it could very well be what he's imagining while he's dying. So overall I thought it was a classic. It's got a very voyeuristic look to it. You're seeing almost all the film through De Niro's eyes. There's very few scenes where he's not in. However, it is a bit of a slow burn film. It does take a while to get going. But overall, I'd give this top marks, 10 out of 10. I thought it deserves to be classed as a classic.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
Next, I'm looking at Evil Dead Burn, the new film in the Evil Dead series. And it's directed by Sebastian Vanecek, and it's a sequel to Evil Dead Rise from 2023, and it's the 6th Evil Dead film overall. It runs 109 minutes, cost 20 million, made back 67 million. So Sam Raimi actually chose the director for this film. So Sam Raimi actually directed the first film in the series, The Evil Dead from 1981. The director wanted to exhaust the audience. His goal was to create a sensory experience that would leave viewers feeling emotionally and physically drained by the end of the film. And he took a different approach to the gore. Although the film was violent, the director deliberately avoided throwing gallons of fake blood around. Said he wanted to create realistic injuries and unsettling imagery, and he thought that would disturb audience more deeply. And the film's a standalone story. It doesn't really follow on from the other Evil Dead films. So I'm a big fan of the 1981 film The Evil Dead, the first one. I've actually reviewed it on the channel. However, I'm not really a fan of the sequels, although I thought the second one, Evil Dead 2 in 1987, was okay. I'm not really a fan of the sequels. So this one starts off well. There's some fantastic gore effects. It's actually one of the goriest films I've seen. There's loads of gore. However, the film does get a bit carried away towards the end, and it becomes your typical over-the-top horror film. And it actually became a little bit jaded towards the end of the gore effects. And I was wanting more plot and atmosphere. Because although the gore effects are fun, for me personally, I want a bit more out of the film. Personally, I prefer more atmosphere and suspense in my films, and this is just like a fun gore ride. And towards the end, although it starts off well, it does become a little bit boring. You kind of get jaded after a while, after too much gore. But it's still a fun film. If you like the Evil Dead films, you will enjoy this one. It's probably one of the better ones, but for me, I can only give it a 7 out of 10. That's the highest mark I can give it.
William, my sweet boy.
Next, The Odyssey. This is the new Christopher Nolan film. He wrote and directed it, and it's based on the Homer ancient Greek poem, one of the very first stories ever written, actually. So it has an all-star cast: Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson. They all produced the A game for this film. So I'm a massive fan of Christopher Nolan. However, this film, it's a bit too long. It runs 173 minutes. That's nearly 3 hours. So I had an issue with how long the film was. It's 250 million to make. However, it is successful. It's made about 988 million so far. It's interesting that it was used filming IMAX 70mm film cameras. The whole film was shot on that. So Nolan's previously used IMAX camera work extensively, but this is the very first time that nearly every frame of the movie is shot on it. So the cameras were really noisy, so they had to be soundproofing. And they shot an extraordinary amount of film. The production went through approximately 2.1 million feet of IMAX film. It's interesting how Nolan uses other actors from previous films. So, for instance, Matt Damon, he was also in Interstellar and Oppenheimer. And a lot of the film was shot for real, going to proper film locations and with practical effects. I thought the great scene with the Cyclops, I thought the Cyclops would have been CGI, but actually used a lot of shots using a model of the Cyclops. So Nolan decided to shoot in real locations. So he captured the travelling and made it very uncomfortable for the actors. Filming lasted 91 days. So it finished 9 days ahead of schedule. So this film was actually one of my most anticipated films of the year, because Christopher Nolan's one of my favourite directors. And although it was a good film, I was slightly disappointed with it. It reminds us a lot of Disclosure Day from Steven Spielberg this year. I was most looking forward to that film as well. But both films had the same problem, and that was they were way too long. They should have been cut down. This film in particular, 3 hours, was way too long. It could have had half an hour cut out. Another thing that distracted me was the casting, awful casting of Elliot Page, the trans actor. He was also in a a Nolan film. He was in Inception when he was called Ellen Page. So Elliot Page, he kind of drew me out of the film when I saw his appearance. As he was in such a masculine role. He was in such a role that should have been differently cast. It was such a masculine role and he wasn't suitable for it. And he drew me out every time he was on screen. I was distracted, couldn't help myself. So I thought that was terrible casting. Very diverse, just for diversity reasons, which was a shame. And also the film's way too long. And it's a disjointed film as well. The best section's the middle section where there's all these monsters. The Cyclops is the best part of the film. Thought that was outstanding. And the sequences with the witch and also the giants, all that stuff was in the middle section, which was the best part of the film. But the beginning and end were a bit of a letdown, actually. Although I was a bit disappointed. It's still a great film. I was just so hyped up for it. A bit like Disclosure Day. I was hyped up for that and disappointed. And the film's been hyped up way too much by some critics, saying it's amazing, just like they did with Oppenheimer, which I liked, but not as much as the critics were going on. So I think out of 10 I'd give this one an 8. 8 out of 10. Good but too long. So the final film's Spider-Man Brand New Day. This is the 38th film in the Marvel Universe, and the 4th to star Tom Holland as Spider-Man. And he was just in another film that I'll review, with the Odyssey. It was directed by Daniel Cretton and runs 145 minutes. That's 2 hours and 25 minutes. And I had an issue with how long it was, a bit like the Odyssey as well. That's 2 films that were a bit too long in my opinion. Both could have been cut. It cost $225 million to make, but it's been an amazing success so far. It's made over $1 billion. That's an amazing profit. And it's intended to be the first of a new trilogy. So it's the 4th standalone outing for Tom Holland. His other films, Homecoming, Far From Home and No Way Home. And this is the first title to not have home in the title. So the film's set 4 years after No Way Home, which is considerably longer than simply picking up from the previous movie. And Peter spent those years essentially alone, because no one can remember him. It's good that the Punisher is in this film. He made his comic debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 129 in 1974. And also the Hulk appears in the film, which is great. Tom Holland was actually injured during production. He suffered a concussion while filming and he had to be taken to hospital. The filmmakers actually deliberately used real life stunt work, which made the action look better. So I thought audiences were suffering from superhero fatigue after Supergirl did such a bad performance. However, this film's been such a massive success. But you have to take into account that Spider-Man's one of the major superheroes. So films which feature heroes like Batman and Superman for DC, they'll do well, but lesser superheroes might not do as well. So the verdict's still out on whether audiences are suffering from superhero fatigue, or is it just like the major superhero films that do well. So I love the bits with the Hulk. I thought the character never looked better than in this film. There were some outstanding highlights with the Hulk. And I think this is actually Tom Holland's best film, the ones he's done so far. I actually think he's a better Peter Parker than Tobey Maguire was. He's really grown on us as Peter Parker. However, the film is overlong. They could have cut at least 20 minutes out. But it has made us excited about superhero films again. And I can't wait for Avengers Doomsday that'll be out later in the year. And we'll find out definitely if superhero fatigue's in the audience, if If Avengers Doomsday doesn't do as well as predicted, then that proves that audiences are getting sick. However, when superhero films are done well, like this one is, that they can be outstanding. I thought some of the web slinging and camera movements were outstanding in this film. The flow better than usual. So out of 10, this is one of the best superhero films I've seen. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. I was really impressed.
Nice flowers.
Oh, they're a housewarming gift.
I'm MJ.
I'm just a neighbor from across the hall.
Friendly neighbor.
So next time, I'll be looking at The Ice Cream Man, The End of Oak Street, the new Insidious film, Out of the Further, and a film called The Dog Stars. So look out for them. See you next time. Like, subscribe and share. Bye everybody. Bye. Bye.